From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, helpful tips on keeping your cool during your colonoscopy. And now, the podcast host who doesn't need a colonoscopy because his bloating and cramping are only growing pains, Pete Dominic!
Yes, still growing, at least emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Thank you very much, Pico. Do people lose it during a colonoscopy? I'm due for one. Still haven't gotten mine, and I need to. People are already worried enough about my gingivitis. Thank you, Barbara. Very thoughtful of you. But yeah, do people lose it? They lose their minds or something, Pete? Get it out of me! Get it out of me! I'm out of here! What is that about? He's always projecting something. Well, hello, my friends. I am taping this as the rain comes down in the solar-powered shed here late on Tuesday night, and I'll be posting it for the Wednesday, August 31st show. That's show number 671 you're listening to right now. Very excited to have you hear both my conversations with these two brilliant guests, Maura Quint and S.E. Cupp, both joining me on today's show. And before I get to that, I want to play a few clips for you. I've got a bunch of stuff on reaction to Joe Biden using the phrase semi-fascism to describe the MAGA philosophy. He apparently made the remarks at a private fundraiser, which is really annoying for me because I spent like 30 minutes trying to find audio of him saying that, but he ever actually didn't say it on tape. It was behind closed doors at a fundraiser. You could argue he should say the same things in public. You understand why politicians don't necessarily, because, man, the firestorm those private remarks created has been going on for days, ever since. I mean, he basically walked all the way up to it at his speech in Bethesda, Maryland. I know this because I watched it and even searched the transcript for him saying these words, which he didn't say on tape. Everybody's just been describing the quote that is attributed to President Biden about him saying semi-fascist. Anyway, that didn't muzzle the reaction from the far right or from his critics, really. And not only that, I mean, John Avlon even criticized those remarks on CNN. So I'm going to play a few of those clips for you to give some context, because everybody's got an opinion on this one. And ever since he said it, there's been a whole bunch of reaction. And I think it's important. I think it's a really important term to discuss where we're at. You've heard this term being used by people on the left to describe Trump and his movement, and mainstream Republicans, actually, for probably a really long time, depending on when you started listening to politics and who you were listening to. But now you're hearing mainstream Republicans say it, like Joe Scarborough and the former Republicans from the Lincoln Project and so much more. David Frum and Dave Rothkopf, who was never a Republican, I don't think. But it's a fascinating discussion. It's an important discussion. And, well, here he is talking about it in his speech in Bethesda, Maryland, where he's out there campaigning for the great Wes Moore for governor. Wes Moore is just an amazing guy. But here are the comments from that speech, where he walks up to fascism but doesn't use it in the speech.
The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security. They're a threat to our very democracy. They refuse to accept the will of the people. They embrace political violence. They don't believe in democracy.
All right, there you go. Well, like I said, he didn't make the comments on tape, but that didn't stop everybody from talking about it this week. Here is on Fox News, perpetual asshole and guy who looks like he remains 22 years old, one of the most influential conservative talkers, and a real dum-dum, but very, very influential. His name is Charlie Kirk, and here he is first.
We have to remain peaceful on our side, but I do think that if they're going to escalate the language, then game on. Like, okay, if you're going to call us a bunch of fascists, we're not going to take that anymore. You're the fascist, Joe Biden, and there's other words we could use as well.
Oh, there are other words you guys can use as well. When did you stop using them? As long as I've been listening to right-wing media, or even Republicans in the mainstream, politicians from John Boehner to Rush Limbaugh, they have been calling Democrats authoritarians, dictators, socialists, communists, Marxists. They've been calling them that long before I was paying attention to it. Ronald Reagan was saying that kind of thing in the 60s, before he even became a politician, when he was making like anti-union vinyl record albums and shit. Anyway, they've always been calling Joe Biden names. I mean, they didn't even accept that Barack Obama was an American, and we know who started that. I mean, it's just wild for anybody to act outraged, because Molly Hemingway also said something like this, that Donald Trump had never said anything as bad as Joe Biden calling them, by the way, at a private fundraiser, semi-fascist. It is, well, everybody understands, I think, what they're doing at this point, just trying to troll us and get us as fired up as they're getting me. But here it is. This is a big deal because apparently Maggie Hassan, she is a Democratic senator in New Hampshire up for, re-election, and WMUR in New Hampshire, local TV outlet, caught up with her the other day and asked her about Biden's semi-fascist comments that were made at a private fundraiser and how they affected what she thought.
Last week, President Joe Biden made headlines when he said Donald Trump's Make America Great Again philosophy is like, quote, semi-fascism. His remarks drew a rebuke from Governor Chris Sununu on CNN Sunday.
Oh, yeah. First, listen to Sununu, who's not a Trumper, but still had this to say on CNN, and then Maggie Hassan.
He effectively called half of America semi-fascist because he's trying to stir up controversy. He's trying to stir up this anti-Republican sentiment right before the election. It's horribly inappropriate. It's insulting, and people should be insulted by it, and he should apologize.
In a one-on-one interview, we asked the senator for her perspective. Do you agree with the president on that?
Look, I have concerns about attacks on our democracy. I have concerns that some people seem to think that violence is the appropriate way of resolving disputes in our democracy, but I think President Biden's comments just painted with way too broad a brush.
And then this local reporter asked some of Senator Hassan's supporters who are actually combat veterans. And this guy apparently served both in Vietnam and Iraq, according to his hat. Here's what he had to say.
Some of Hassan's veteran supporters say they don't see anything wrong with what the president said.
I agree. If you look at the radical Trump people who, no matter what you tell them, are still hard and fast and will go to the trenches and go to the Capitol to overthrow the government, those are fascist. Okay? So he's calling them what they are.
In Manchester, Adam Sexton, WMUR News 9.
Good reporting from Manchester's Adam Sexton. I thought that was good stuff. Well, maybe John Avlon, my friend John Avlon, and Alice Stewart at CNN didn't see that report, but it sounds like John in this piece is, in this commentary on CNN, is trying to argue that it's just bad rhetoric for certain Democrats that are running. I mean, even if I'm giving that benefit of the doubt, but I really don't agree with John on this. Here it is.
The term semi-fascist is not helpful. It's not befitting the office of president. And while you can absolutely call out the dangers to our democracy, but it makes obviously perfect sense for someone like Senator Hassan, because look, in New Hampshire, more than 40% of registered voters are independents, right? I mean, another 30 and change are Republicans. Democrats are the third category among registered voters. So she needs to be able to reach out, and that language doesn't help her do that.
And actually, you're being kind in terms of trying to parse and put what he said into a certain context. The takeaway from Republicans is that the president of the United States, who campaigned on, won on, and was sworn in on a message of unity, lowering the temperature and bringing this country together, just called half of the country fascist. And you can parse it how you want, but that's the takeaway. And then Maggie Hassan was right. He painted the Republican Party as a bunch of fascists.
All right. So that's what they heard. But is what they heard what other people are hearing? And what is the definition of fascism? Well, I reached out to our friend Bill B in D.C., and showed him that clip. And here's what he replied with that publicly on Twitter at Bill B in D.C. to me and John Avlon. Well, he said he'd love to discuss it with him on a panel, but he quotes the author Robert Paxton from The Anatomy of Fascism. He says, fascism may be defined as a form of political behavior marked by obsessive preoccupation with community decline, humiliation, or victimhood, and by compensatory cults of unity, energy, and purity in which a mass-based party of committed nationalist militants working in uneasy but effective collaboration with traditional elites abandons democratic liberties and pursues with redemptive violence and without ethical or legal constraints goals of internal cleansing and external expansion. It's a pretty highbrow definition from Robert Paxton, of course, sent to us by Bill B in D.C. But he also texted me and said, John Avlon essentially says it's bad politics for Democrats and mentions Senator Hassan's race. For her, it might be, although there's no actual polling to show that. Thing is, Avalon himself would say that the president's first job is to be the president for the whole country. That means identifying and addressing dangers to it as a whole. Look at Paxson's definition. That's precisely where the Trump base of the GOP is. Biden's clearly doing the greater job he was elected to carry out. So that is Bill B in D.C. and his response. And I've just got a couple more because I think this is important. And I want to do more learning here and then sharing what I've learned with you on the podcast with these clips at the top whenever possible. So here is Tucker Carlson trying to terrify his audience about these comments. I hate to do this to you, but you got to hear it. It's 1 minute.
The administration, like Antifa, is very concerned about the existence of something called fascists. But like Antifa, the Biden administration has never defined the term fascist, or really any of the terms it throws around, including equity. So who are these fascists who are threatening our country? Well, of course, anyone who disagrees with Joe Biden is by definition a fascist. And last week, those of us who suspected that was the definition were not surprised to see him define it pretty precisely. In what turned out to be one of the most chilling statements ever made by an American president, he declared that Republicans are, quote, semi-fascists. Really? You don't like me? You're a fascist? The White House has since confirmed that Joe Biden meant what he said. So that is effectively a declaration of war against half the country. What do we do to fascists? Well, we fought a war to kill them.
All right, so it's a declaration of war. Okay, well, that is the most influential guy in right-wing media, which is why sometimes you got to play him, I think. Now let's go to someone who agrees with the president. This is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, DNC, defending Joe Biden's semi-fascist remarks on CBS's Face the Nation.
Chairman, earlier this week, the president referred to the MAGA, Make America Great agenda, as almost like, quote, semi-fascism. You heard the president's inaugural address the same way I did. In that inaugural address, President Biden said we should not view each other as adversaries in this country, but as neighbors, and we should treat each other with dignity and respect. How does semi-fascism as a label for the Republican Party fit with that inaugural address?
Well, the one thing that President Joe Biden has always been consistent. And he has always been somebody who does what my grandfather used to do, which is speak it plain. Say it plain to the American people.
Well, I would just prefer if Major Garrett, the CBS anchor asking that question, would have referenced the work of scholars, experts on authoritarianism. Maybe they disagree. Maybe there's a whole bunch that disagree. I don't know. Maybe that's not fair. But I like to think that there are a lot of credible experts on this issue. It's not that difficult of an issue to look at. There's no absolute equivalent of fascism in Italy to even Germany at the time, much less where we're at in America and what we see as fascism. But taking the definitions and taking the scholarship on the issue, let's go to someone who knows. This is Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who I've definitely got to get back on the show to talk about this and more on CNN this weekend with Jim Acosta.
And President Biden, Ruth, I'm sure you saw this and thought it was interesting. He weighed in on this radical streak at the heart of the Trump movement right now. And he said it's like semi-fascism. Those are the words he used. Democrats can call this stuff out all they want and try to bring down the temperature, but a whole segment of the population won't hear it. What do you think? Do you agree with Biden's assessment that part of the MAGA movement, much of the MAGA movement, is semi-fascist?
I actually think that's the perfect term because it takes a lot from the leader cult, even though the leader's no longer in office, to the loyalty quotients, to the party line. The GOP has a party line, and that's the big lie, right? It's acting like a fascist party and more broadly an authoritarian party. The semi-part is interesting because today you don't shut down elections. You hold elections and then you fix them. Right. So that you have the appearance of the democracy, like Orban in Hungary calls it illiberal democracy. So that's the part that's the semi-fascist. But yeah, the tactics that they're using are straight out of the playbook that started with Mussolini.
Well, that says about it all, but there's more, folks, in today's lesson on fascism. Let's go to one of the best experts out there today Timothy Snyder of Yale University, widely seen as one of the most credible, respected experts out there. I've interviewed him several times. His book On Tyranny is a must-buy, and here he is on the State of American Democracy, an organization I've worked with, YouTube page, talking for a couple minutes. I think it's worth it, about fascism. Let's head into Professor Snyder's classroom, where apparently there's a piano playing.
Next few minutes is to think about fascism. Now, when we hear the word fascism, we might think of places that are far away or times that are long ago. But I think it's quite important for all of us, and perhaps above all Americans, to be thinking about fascism as something that can arrive anytime and any place. Fascism is an attitude. It's an attitude that we can try to recognize. It's an attitude that has three parts. The first part is that you take globalization personally. You don't think that globalization is about economics or about technology or about new capacities to do things. You think globalization is about some group or some individual which is acting against your country or you personally. The second part of the fascist attitude is that you prefer the will over the facts. It doesn't matter what's actually out there in the world. What matters is how I feel about it. And more importantly, it matters how my leader can make me feel about it. That's the third part of the attitude. Fascism puts the person above the law. This is what's called the leader principle. It doesn't matter what the law says. My leader can do what my leader wants to do, because it's my leader who explains to me how globalization works against me. It's my leader who explains to me how I should be feeling. Fascism also has tactics that we can recognize, become familiar with if we want to resist them. One tactic is to define an enemy, which is both inside and outside. Somehow within the country there's a group, and that group is not really part of the nation, but that group is also connected to some hostile force outside of the nation. The second tactic is the ritualistic use of language. Language is not about describing the world, it's about defining the world. It's about telling you who those enemies are. It's about finding those short slogans, those three-part slogans, bang, 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 that tell us who we are and who's outside and who's the enemy.
All right. So good. Sorry, that might be jarring for me to jump back in there, but I love that from Timothy Snyder of Yale University. And that is, by the way, if you want to watch the rest of it, go to the State of American Democracy's YouTube page. It's a great initiative, that organization, which I'm not sure how much it's taken off, but it was founded, that initiative, after Trump got elected, by my friend David Orr, who you may know from this show as being one of the smartest people that I certainly respect almost more than anybody I've ever met and talked to in all of America, my world. So great initiative, great YouTube page, and great definition of fascism by Timothy Snyder. So that's today's lesson. I think it's fair to say at this point that John Aflon, my friend, is wrong, and that unless I'm misinterpreting something he said, and hopefully I'll get him on here to talk about it soon, and that Joe Biden is very right, as are all the historians and analysts who I've certainly been talking to, who have been saying this for a long time about the MAGA movement. All right, well, the other big issue yesterday, or over the past few days that we've been hearing about, is Lindsey Graham on Fox News saying that if Trump were to get arrested, there'd be violence in the streets, or whatever he said. Here it is.
If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
Yeah, so those comments from, I think it was Sunday night or over the weekend, by Senator Lindsey Graham got a major reaction from around the country, and even the President of the United States, who responded to Lindsey Graham's comments, and also politics and patty cake.
By the way, no one expects politics to be a patty cake. It sometimes gets mean as hell. But the idea you turn on the television and see senior senators and congressmen saying, if such and such happens, there'll be blood in the street. Where the hell are we?
Well, after he said, where the hell are we, apparently one of his aides ran up to the stage and told him he was in Pennsylvania, sir. I kid the president. That's an ageist joke. That's not fair. That's wrong. A lot of people are mad at me right now. I'm sorry. Okay, well, there he goes. And so Lindsey Graham slithered back into the safe waters of Brian Kilmeade's embrace on Fox News, and now he responds to what President Biden just said about him.
Senator, he's referring to you. What is he talking about? I guess it was a comment you made Sunday when asked about whether President Trump is arrested or indicted.
Yeah, so what I said Sunday was I reject violence, but I also reject a double standard here. So if they try to prosecute President Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, when she was Secretary of State, people in this country will lose faith in law enforcement.
Just like I lost faith in the opposite gender when I was a young boy. Oh, that's not fair either. What am I doing? What a disgrace I've become. I mean, I'm not as disgraceful as Lindsey Graham, but that's not fair. Come on. All right, well, I like Lawrence O'Donnell, and he went off on a rant about Lindsey Graham's comments here, and this was trending, so I thought I'd include this as part of it.
Well, Lindsey Graham has hit rock bottom. Rock bottom is the sad term that AA uses for the spot where people who drink too much have to find themselves before they can help themselves or be helped. But there is no cure for what has sunk Lindsey Graham to his own very dangerous rock bottom. Rock bottom is dangerous for people addicted to drugs and alcohol, so dangerous that that's where some of them die. But in Lindsey Graham's rock bottom, he is threatening the deaths of others. Senator Lindsey Graham did what no senator in our lifetimes has done. Senator Lindsey Graham said something this weekend that you've never heard another United States senator say. Lindsey Graham said something that no other senator has ever said in the history of the United States Senate. Lindsey Graham actually said, if you prosecute a friend of mine, there'll be riots in the streets.
Lawrence O'Donnell with the final word on MSNBC and that issue. So moving on from fascism and the latest with Lindsey Graham's comments and what they mean, one more thing. It's time to go to Pundit Watch, which is a way of talking about the point that I think personally is most important when watching. If you want to know the answer to the question, will Donald Trump's influence finally start to wane? Will his control over so many people start to loosen its grip? Will his supporters start to lose faith in him? Everybody's got a different version of that question, but my answer is, if you watch the pundits, Pundit Watch, his supporters in right-wing media who profit and grift off his grifting, if they start to move away from him, that's all that matters. And there's been more of that. First, here is Ann Coulter on her podcast.
Thought I'd start with something that's kind of a perennial. Doesn't matter if I'm taping this in January, February, March, or really probably October of this year. Trump and his effect on the Republican Party, his future in the Republican Party. Back in January, I wrote a column saying he was done. I finally had the data, the proof, the evidence. And I recommend you look it up. That apparently opened the floodgates for a lot of Republicans who could see in the numbers. No, he really doesn't have a lot of Trump diehards anymore.
All right, and she slathered on and blathered on more. But then we heard apparently from Ben Shapiro, who said there's a reason Democrats are eager to keep Trump at the center of the conversation. Half of independents say Trump is a major factor in their vote, and they're breaking 4-1 for Democrats. Republicans shouldn't be playing that game. If they do, they're cruising for a bruising, said Ben Shapiro. And like I said, so it's not only Ann Coulter, it's Ben Shapiro, but he hasn't lost Kelly Ann Conway. No, she had a smart take, do you think, on America's Newsroom on Fox News. She does not like Ben Shapiro or what Ann Coulter are saying. And here is her spin on Trump's influence.
The independents were some of the first to refuse to pledge their allegiance to Biden. I think when you saw the erosion of his overall polling numbers early on in his presidency, it was because independents who had supported him for president were starting to migrate away from him. Dana, this is very simple for me. When Trump is the leader of the party, when he's involved in the conversation in the election, in the 2018 midterms, You had 4 pickups from blue to red. It is the first time since John Kennedy in 1962 that a president in power's party picked up a single Senate seat in a midterm election, and they picked up 4. The other thing, and this is important, I mean, the party in power has only done this 4 times since 1934 in the midterms, and Trump was one of them in 2018, right after the very bruising, very brutal, and frankly, fundamentally unfair battle over the Kavanaugh nomination that happened within a month that election. Quickly, let me just end with this. Those who want to move on from Trump, you go first. People are so obsessed with him, they don't spend a minute learning what the 74 million Trump-Pence voters want in these midterm elections. That's what I study every single day. But they're so obsessed with Donald Trump. Anybody who wants the party to move on from Trump, I dare you go first. And anytime the Democrats tell you which Republican should be your nominee, run in the other direction, because they know that they're fixing to make that person unpalatable.
All right, well, I don't know about Kellyanne Conway's history, but I think she's wrong. I agree with Ben Shapiro and Ann Coulter. Kellyanne Conway dismissing calls for Republicans to move away from Donald Trump, doubling down on the loyalty to her former boss. And man, the best reality show in the world would be Inside the Marriage of George and Kellyanne Conway. I think about it all the time. All right, I'm sorry I started singing. The other day I started singing a new jingle about to introduce a new segment where I just read and share some of my favorite tweets. So send me your favorite tweets, standupwithpete@gmail.com, or DM them to me on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, I'll give you a shout out. But I needed a jingle. Well, you know what? Phil Round wrote a whole 3-minute song, all to the tune of a few of my favorite things, just like I asked, and it's wonderful. And I'm going to share with you, tell you some of my tweets, and then we'll have Essie, Cupp, and Maura, Quint, and it's going to be awesome. But first, Phil Round, out in Wyoming, longtime listener, professional musician, PhilRoundMusic.com, the first of our talented musicians who listen and subscribe to take a shot at it, and I absolutely loved it. Here we go.
Trey liberal redneck who calls out stupidity. Prof. G. Scott Galloway who talks of liquidity. Mallory M. serving heads on a platter. These are some favorite tweets that should matter. Items that might bump the Dems in the midterms. Witnesses from Jan 6 nailing those Trump germs. 10 tiny ducklings removed from a pool. Disgraced former prez shows the world he's a fool. Late Show Colbert gives his take on the news. Preachers who prey on those asses in pews. Ellie Mistal retorts to old Tucker. Lawsuits against Alex Jones, that fat fucker. When the storms strike, when the fires spread, when I'm spitting mad, I try to remember my favorite tweets and prove not everybody's been had. Brilliant comments from tellers of truth, rhetorical home runs that outshine Babe Ruth, smashing another Fox vacuous talker. Old Clarence Thomas endorsing Hersch Walker. A baby that laughs like a drunk jolly booze hound. 1,000-pound grizzly bear walks through a campground, scrolling for doom in an empty dark room. Nowadays, face to face just means you zoom. Hear Levine speak like latrines reek. There's no place to hide. Just try to remember your favorite tweets, and you won't feel dead inside.
Well, how about that from Phil Round? PhilRoundMusic.com, everybody. If you want to book him, if you want him to write a jingle, if you want, I mean, that was great. I put it out there on Monday. I sang it myself. It was awful for everybody who had to hear it, and mostly for me, but he wrote a whole song, My Favorite Tweets. What an amazing community of creative people we have contributing to the show all the time. And thank you very much, Phil. Speaking of some of my favorite tweets, here are a few from Tuesday. I just love this simple and funny tweet from my friend, comedian Lori Kilmartin at AnyLori16, who tweets, I'm done with afternoons. Fuck 'em. Because I can so relate, and I think it's mainly because it's been so hot for so long in the afternoons, and it just saps my energy. I like to get up early and go pretty hard, but by the time the afternoon rolls around, I'm often ready for a nap, and I just don't feel that productive. So I often take a quick nap, and then I do feel productive, so I highly recommend that. Back to favorite tweets. The hilarious Jay Black tweeted, Republicans aren't able to complain anymore about gas prices hurting their wallets, so they pivoted to blaming Joe Biden for making them buy those now useless gas is $8 a gallon bumper stickers. And while I'm on Jay Black's Twitter feed, he also tweeted this. Spy movies taught us that it would take the coordinated efforts of hundreds of malicious agents to undermine the United States. Q has taught us that all it actually takes is a LARPing dirt farmer with an 8chan account pretending America's dumbest president is a secret hero to do it. That's at Jay Black is funny. And speaking of funny and smart, Ellie Mistal tweeted today, how many more days are the 100% racist people going to complain about being called semi-fascist by the president? Like, is this just going to be what they do till football season? Ellie Mistal. All right. I'm out of time, and I've been working hard on today's show, putting it together. I hope you liked it. I'm back, baby. Could play some clips here, try to learn some things together as much as I can every day, and get you two guests to have great conversations with as well. And I did just that with Maura Quint, who I had a great conversation with about parenting and politics and student loan forgiveness and more. She gave me the great recommendation to interview Melissa Byrne, who is an activist, and I'm trying to get her. I should have her on tomorrow's show. But first, I've got S.E. Cupp joining me. Of course, you know her from, well, every major media outlet, all of the major cable news outlets. She's appeared on first Fox News, then she was on MSNBC years ago, and now she is at CNN, and she writes a column for the Daily News. She is an author. She is a mother. She is really, really smart, great on Twitter and Instagram. I've gotten to know her so well. She's also gotten very, very transparent about mental health and supported and promoted some great causes and friends like Inara, the nonprofit that she's on the board of. And she's just a good friend, a great person. We had a great conversation, and it starts awkwardly. There's a couple awkward moments that are hilarious in it, and I loved it. I love this conversation. I love SE, and here we go. Oh, my God. I just hit a sound effect by accident, and all of them are going off. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Leave it. You got to leave that.
Oh, my God. So I bumped the fan at my desk and it hit the soundboard and all of those effects went off to start our interview.
You have to leave them.
They're in now. Oh, what's this? Oh, that's my stand-up act. Hi, welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be back. I have missed you.
That's sweet. I've missed you, too. You've seemingly had a couple of good trips. You've had a good summer with your husband and your son and your pup, but you also have been ill a fair bit, according to Instagram. What's gone on? Anything serious? Or are you okay?
I'm okay. It was crazy. July sucked because it wasn't just me. So I got COVID for the second time at the end of June. And it was fine. Like, I worked through it. I stayed home, but I worked at home and no one in my family got it. So that was great. Not fun, but fine. And then 4th of July comes and I have some folks over, and that day, Jack, my son, all of a sudden gets 104 fever out of nowhere. I test him for COVID. He's negative. So my husband takes him to the ER and he's got some, virus of unknown origin apparently going around among all the kids. So that's, 5-day experience. Then that comes right up against our trip to Florida. So we go to Florida, fingers crossed, everyone's going to be fine. Everyone's fine for the trip. Then I get home and I have some Florida disease that I find out is both a virus and a bacterial infection. I have them both at the same time. And no one in a couple hospitals that I have to go to can tell me what it is. They can tell me what it isn't. And it wasn't COVID. It wasn't all kinds of things, but they weren't really sure what it was. And I was stuck with that for about 12 days.
No.
And it was way worse than COVID. It was awful and long. And I felt lucky after that to like be alive. So, and then by then we were into August. So it was like July was a kind of blur and like sick bed, fever dream, hope to just survive this kind of month.
Yikes. Did you learn anything through your illness? Did you become the Buddha or anything during that time because you were so ill and couldn't?
I'll tell you one thing that was that came out of this. Because I was so ill and any noise really bothered me, bothered my eyes, bothered my ears, bothered my head. Like I turned everything off and I have Ring alerts on my phone, right? So like all the Ring alerts, the yard, the front door, anytime anyone's here, a deer comes by, my phone goes off.
Right.
And in my anxiety-ridden mind, I thought I'd alleviate my anxiety by having those alerts on so I could always check who's here. Is there a predator? No, it's just a deer. And so literally 2 a.m, a Ring alert goes off on my phone. I get up and look. So I got bad sleep. Anyway, during this illness, I turn it off.
Good.
So for 12 nights.
And someone broke in your house and killed your family.
The house is still here. Family's safe. I'm sure the deer had a great time. And then I never turned them back on. And I was talking to my therapist about this. And she said, it's amazing that you thought you'd be less anxious with all these alerts constantly going. So you'd know who's here and what's going on. When of course you're less anxious, which I am, without all of this intrusive sort of like, literal alarm bells, going off in your mind and in your life. So I'm grateful for the 12-day deathbed, because I've turned all my Ring alerts off. I can still check Ring when I need to know, like, did the kid get home, okay? Or did, someone get into the house or whatever, but I'm not constantly bombarded by these alarms that make my heart race every time.
Well, that is a great lesson. That's a great lesson. I'm glad I asked, because that's something very, what's worse though, now that my daughters are 14 and 17-year-old Ava went into the city for 2 nights with her friends and stayed in like an Airbnb. And what's worse is that you can check exactly where your kid is standing. And when I wake up at 3 a.m. and see she's in Chelsea and not where she's supposed to be on 116th Street, I'm like, what's she doing in Chelsea at 3 a.m? And you know what? Her response is, what are you doing looking at where I am? I'm fine. Were your parents satelliting you when you were that age? No. And you did stuff and you didn't have to worry about them following you around. And it's not great. It's not a great thing. And it certainly, talk about anxiety. I was like, oh, great. She's just in the meat packing district at 3 in the morning.
Right. I don't know how I'm going to be. I mean, part of the reason I'm addressing some of this anxiety now is to spare Jack my future, from my future self.
That's great. That's healthy.
I don't want him to be saddled with my, my craziness. And so, but I don't know. I mean, it seems awesome to be able to track your kids. That's definitely sounds like something I would want to do.
I want to I'd love to hear from people listening, and I want to have a wider conversation. It certainly seems awesome on paper, but I'm not sure that it is. It also has created more than a couple of arguments where I was like, what were you doing over here? And it was a misunderstanding. Like, she told Val, my wife, that she's going to be over there. Like she had done duty, and I'm over here giving her grief. It's not great, I think, for most part. I don't know where I am on it. It's like, I'm glad I have it, but I when you talk to them about it, Guess what? The kids don't like their parents knowing where they are all the time. They don't love that, believe it or not. No one does, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
No human being likes everybody knowing where they are all the time.
I can understand that. I can.
Also, you know where all of your friends are because they have Snapchat. So if you're not at a party, it's like, oh, look at all my friends are there, but I am not. Okay.
That sucks too.
You've been writing a lot, and I want to talk to you about the things you've been writing and saying on the CNN and the writing on the Twitter and of course at the Daily News. Certainly wanted to get S.C. Cupp's take on the FBI searching Mar-a-Lago and all that has come out of it and all that we have learned about how long they were trying to get these documents back and how some of them, and then he said he'd give them all, but he didn't, and then come to find out they were top secret stuff, and what does it all mean? And a lot of the usual supporters of his are maybe clamming up a little bit, and I just wonder at this point, here at the end of August, you wrote about this at the Daily News titled, "The FBI raid is terrible news for Trump. Why is Trump world unable to contain its excitement?" That was a couple of weeks ago. Do you think that's still going on?
Well, I think reality has set in. Look, right. At first they liked being able to claim, that they were the victims of a deep state that let's face it, Trump invented, like for moments like this, right? So that when the FBI, descends, he can say, look, I told you they were corrupt. They weren't. And so they enjoyed it in the beginning because Trump's back in the news. He's a victim. They could make this look like a political hit job. But I think the news has sunk in the reality that this is not great for Trump, and that hitching their wagon to him now 2 years after he lost everything for Republicans probably wasn't a great idea and might not pan out yet again in the midterms or 2024. So, you can't get around realities. You can pretend and you can shout conspiracies, but eventually realities are there. And polling backs this up. Most Americans do not think the FBI was wrong to take back classified documents that don't belong at Mar-a-Lago. Most Americans don't think the FBI is at fault here. They think Trump is.
Interesting to see how the public opinion of the FBI changes, certainly amongst Trump supporters, Republicans, conservatives. You turned on the Fox News. If you turned on the Fox News, you saw the Jesse Waters with a graphic over his shoulder. I won't forget this. It was the FBI logo, and it says, the caption says, "Rotten to the core." That's just a graphic. That was just to help him set up talking about how the FBI was rotten to the core. I mean, I've been reading the experts on this for a long time, and this is the kind of thing that people were saying about the FBI after Ruby Ridge and Waco. And we can argue the FBI was inappropriate or did the wrong thing or even broke the law in certain cases. But that didn't justify Timothy McVeigh killing infants and hundreds of others in Oklahoma City. But that was that mentality. And so this idea that mainstream right-wing media is taking on the FBI. I mean, it was always the left that was critical mainly of the FBI. Mainstream right-wing media, calling them rotten to the core. What do you think that means for the FBI, for America?
I mean, it's on the one hand, it's wild, right? Because if you turned on the TV in the days after, months, in fact, after 9/11, years, in fact, I mean, anyone of any law enforcement, background was heroic and unimpeachable and not to be questioned among the right? Because, everyone was doing a heroic job. And now it's all about convenience. The FBI is rotten because it's investigating Trump. Journalists are rotten because they're calling out Trump. Generals are rotten because they're disagreeing with Trump. This is all convenient because it's never Trump's fault. It can't be. It couldn't be. They've invested too much in him. So it has to be everyone else. And Trump did such a good job of conditioning that environment and getting people to believe that before it became true, before he could give any evidence of it. And look, the FBI is not perfect. Law enforcement isn't perfect. Journalists aren't perfect. The military isn't perfect. But the environment he conditioned was for all of this, to be able to say, look at how corrupt they are instead of look at how corrupt he is.
Just realized I wasn't recording the video. I got the audio, which is most important. But here we go. Okay, so really good points, all of them. And now we are here at the end of August, and you've got a piece coming out. Is it the new Daily News piece? But also you've got a CNN piece, which you could argue, which you could relate to. The CNN piece is titled Voters Are Really Fired Up About 2022 Midterms, and for good reason. And you go into all of the polling, and then you ask a question to your readers and CNN viewers about the issues that they care about. And then I think it's your Daily News pieces, which is coming out about the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, and what that has meant for who?
For both parties. I mean, it really changed the political landscape for both parties. And starting with the CNN piece, which is actually an introduction to a new series that we're going to do at CNN, where we ask real people, what is driving you to the polls? Because we can all talk about it's the economy, stupid, inflation, gas prices, and we can look at polls, but we need to ask people what actually driving them to the polls. Yeah. So we looked at this midterm election and things like intensity and enthusiasm. Both are up in terms of how important people think this election is and how excited they are to go and vote. Both are up historically. And then we're going to look at why that is. Now, to the Roe point, and my New York Daily News column this week, back in May, the night that Politico released the leaked, decision from SCOTUS, anyone who's looked at literally any abortion poll since 1976, since Gallup started doing polling on abortion, would have told you this is bad. This is bad for Republicans. Because abortion polling, unlike almost any other issue, has not changed in decades. People's attitudes on abortion have remained almost the same. If you look at Gallup's polling, it's basically a straight line from 1976 to 2022. Couple little spikes and dips, but basically a straight line. The majority has always believed that abortion should be legal with some restrictions. Always. The minority has always believed that abortion should either be legal in all cases or illegal in all cases. That has not changed. So, and if you look at like gun control, immigration, climate, gay marriage, that polling has changed significantly in both directions. It flip-flops, it goes up, it goes down. In the case of gay marriage, it's only gone up. Abortion's real unique. The country has decided they want abortion legal with restrictions. So when Roe came along and upended what most people have thought was settled law and they really like, I mean, it didn't have to be Republicans writing the decision for them to get the blame. And then Republicans went ahead and, enacted a lot of the new legislation in these states to effectively ban abortions. And so I knew that Roe was going to be a huge motivating turnout driver. And it turns out in a lot of states, Democrats are up in the polls. Voters are saying it's because of abortion.
You have the caveat in the CNN piece, and I'm sure in this, that you can't know, but it certainly would seem to be the case. If a poll says this, and then when you ask people, they say this, I'm not sure how much more evidence you need to convince the public or whoever we're talking to reading that's what's going on. It's something that was predicted, though, too, by a lot of people, that if you did this, if you took away an entire gender, this isn't like a health insurance issue. This isn't a racial issue. This is like women, one gender in America, losing control of their body, that even people who weren't paying attention to politics, including young people, young women and men and boys who support them, would be like, whoa, wait, what country are we living in? Because Mexico just legalized abortion. So did Ireland, other Catholic countries. Like, we're going back, it was predicted, right? Like, this would be just hard to know how much of a political backlash.
Well, I can't think of another right, what many people considered a right, that's been taken back. I mean, can you imagine a generation saying, I don't have a right that my parents did? I don't have access to something that my parents had access to. In fact, my grandparents, in some cases, had access to. That's wild to think, but the Republican Party, and I, it's safe to say the conservative court, again, thanks to Donald Trump and his 3 Supreme Court appointments, the guy ruins everything. The party's really going in this like dystopian DeLorean back in time. And I don't think anyone wants to take that ride. I mean, save for like the fringe of the Republican voters, the MAGA world, people are really scared about where Republicans want to take this country. It's book bans. It's regressive bullshit that even if you're on center right, you think, well, I don't want to go that far. I mean, I'm pro-life and I want Roe to be upheld. I think abortion should be legal, safe, and rare. I'm in the majority. And so I just think that abortion's a driving issue, but it's also an avatar for the general extremism of the Republican Party. And that's what voters are responding to.
When you say you're pro-life, you mean you personally wouldn't get...
Yes, I'm pro-life, which is why I won't go and get an abortion.
Got it. That's what it means for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not deciding in any other woman's rights in that case.
No, I long accepted Roe as settled law of the land, as did every Supreme Court justice before these.
Do you think this is changing minds? You saw one Republican who voted or was in support of the Roe v. Wade being overturned and no exceptions, I think voted in support somehow or voted against codifying, I think was the thing, a House member. And I think his daughter had some serious issues. And he basically was like, whoa, my vote was wrong. Maybe I read that wrong. But I'm sure we're going to see more of that. People who supported restricting rights of women who are now going to change on that based on seeing what it actually means in real life and potentially in their life. A lot of men for sure, but some women as well. Do you think there's much of that, given now that the reality is here?
I mean, we'll have to see, but I won't be surprised at all, because when Republicans talked for years about overturning Roe, I mean, it was all theoretical. And I don't know a single Republican who believed that it would happen. And I've been a movement conservative for 25 years. And I didn't know anyone who legitimately thought that would happen. So when it did, and now you have to contemplate what that actually means practically, I think a lot of people, either for political reasons, didn't want to be tied to the policy, or legitimate reasons, because, I don't know, rounding up women and jailing them for their abortions or punishing victims of rape by making them carry their rapist's baby. I mean, maybe that sounds a little medieval to people. So I think a lot of things are happening. And that's why I say it's changed the political landscape for both parties, because this was supposed to be a midterm election year like every other, where the party in power was punished. Democrats were supposed to be, at the receiving end of a Republican bloodbath. And now I will not be surprised if Democrats keep the Senate and even the House.
Well, your lips to voters' ears. But you also have a movement of secretaries of state in red states not wanting to count those votes. And we can talk about that. But there's one more thing I wanted to definitely ask you about, which you wrote about at the Daily News as well. Your most recent column, outside of this one that's, I think, going to be posted by the time this conversation posts about abortion that we just talked about, which is step up and say whether or not it's so, Joe. Biden should speak fully on his plans to run in 2024 or not. The president has said he's planning on running again. People should take him at his word, S.E. Cupp writes in the Daily News. Well, I have S.E. Cupp right here, so I'm going to ask her more about this article. You think that the president should announce whether or not he's running now?
I think you need, and I only say this because Democrats have been so tepid and lukewarm about whether he should. If every Democrat was coming out and saying, absolutely he should run, then he doesn't have to say he's going to run anytime soon. But you had a lot of Democrats either afraid to say that he should run or outright saying he's not going to run. All that looks bad for Joe Biden. And so I think the smart thing to do would be to shut the conversation down, either saying you're going to run or not going to run, because the longer this question mark remains, the less enthusiastic I think you're going to hear, people are. And that's bad. That's bad for him.
I wonder if this question that's been asking so many Democrats, would you want Joe Biden to come help you campaign in the final stretch here? And depending on who it is, most of them, avoid the question, or some of them be like, yeah, sure. And then you get your Charlie Crist, who lists off all of Joe Biden's great accomplishments as of late and says, absolutely. There's a varying range of opinions there. But do you think that Joe Biden's popularity slowly inching back up changes the dynamics for him, much less other Democrats? Because pretty fair to connect a lot of good things to him. I mean, just to see where we're at. I mean, his approval rating was like the lowest ever, even lower than Trump's was. People were paying a ton of money for gas and even milk. And, that was about the only thing that really seemed to matter to people, and for whatever it's worth. Do you think that his political fortunes are changing so dramatically that it makes him want to run and makes Democrats want to support him in 2024? I mean, it's a long way to go, much less those that are up for election in 70 days should invite him down or up or wherever direction it is that he would have to travel.
I think we should be cautious. He's up in the polls starting from a very low approval rating, and he's still underwater, and he's still got some problems, even in his own party. A lot of Democrats are not happy about the student loan debacle, which is what I think it was, a pander that I think a lot of, blue collar folks are real angry about. He's got some issues that he still has to deal with in his own party. I mean, African-American voters are not thrilled with the job Joe Biden has done.
Well, they like that college loan thing, black folks. Overwhelmingly, black folks who had to borrow money, certainly, I think, like the college loan forgiveness, I think. That's one thing, at least. But go ahead. Yes,
I think making 240 million Americans pay off those loans, I don't think that sits well with a lot of his own constituents.
You think lot? I think some, but I don't know. I really don't know. But you're saying a lot.
Well, I'm hearing from a lot of Democrats who are running in state races, and then Democrat consultants and operatives who are like, this is bad. This is bad for us. It's not bad everywhere.
But in some districts,
in some places, it's not good.
Races. Huh.
Yeah. And so
you don't think it's good.
I don't think Joe Biden's dead in the water, but I don't think he has a mandate either.
Well, I haven't talked to anybody really who has articulated, I think, your opinion, but you don't like the policy of college loan forgiveness.
There's two things. I don't like the policy. I also don't think it was politically smart.
Okay.
For Democrats.
We just talked about that one. So why don't you like the policy?
I think if I'm someone who either worked really hard to send my kid to school, made a lot of sacrifices, and, didn't get any help with it, or I'm someone that, like my husband, worked really hard to pay off his own student loan debts, I think it makes you resentful and feel like, well, what was the point of me doing the right thing, working hard, if at the end, one president or a political party can just decide, this year I feel like, you guys can all get a break. And by the way, taxpayers pay for it. I just think that's bad policy, and not even the most effective thing you could do, right? I mean, he could have paid for universal pre-K with the same amount of money from the same taxpayers. And I think that would have been a much better use of that money, both politically and
Is that right? That's an interesting, it's always interesting to say, what could you have done with this money? That is even more interesting, that progressives would have wanted. I will push back on I worked hard and paid back my loan, because so many people worked harder than anybody in the world and still couldn't afford to pay back whatever they borrowed for any number of.
Absolutely. And I think
why do you hate those people?
No, I totally agree with you. I don't agree with this solution to that correct problem. And I think, if we wanted to look at the way higher education is bankrupting not just our kids, but our families and our communities, I think we should do that and tackle, the rising cost of tuition and all of that. I don't think forgiving student loans for 40 million people when 260 million of them are going to have to pay for it I don't think that's a good idea.
All right. Wow.
That's just me.
not just you.
This is not surprising. I'm not progressive. You should not be surprised by this.
I'm not surprised at all by it. I don't think it's just you. I'm taking a beat to wonder if I should belabor the argument and how that affects the rest of our conversation. That's literally what happened.
Our love, Pete, our love is unconditional.
It's not even that. It's not about our friendship or will you come on again if I somehow pissed you off or something, because it's literally, I have like 2 more minutes with you. Do I want to mount one more point or do I want to ask her one more question?
I think you should mount one more point. I think you'll feel better if you go ahead and make one more point on it.
Well, then you're a selfish prick.
I'm so glad I gave you that opportunity. Crickets.
I guess I wouldn't even know exactly. I don't know. I think you make fine arguments about, those who didn't have to and those. I just don't like the idea that because I had to deal with something or I had to work hard over here for something that this person over here, I should be resentful. I'm not resentful of that. I'm resentful only of people who were born on third base and acted like they worked as hard as me or something like that. But I'm not like, hey, that guy had any number of circumstances during the term of that loan he's supposed to pay back. Like he was really sick and couldn't work, or, he had a fucked up loan that he didn't know about. That whole idea that young people take out these loans for colleges, they don't know that they're going to have to pay some of this back. And you're supposed to be naive.
Let's address that problem.
Yeah, well, you're naive. You're a college student. You don't read the fine print. It's structured so that you don't know, I feel.
Let's fix that problem.
Should, but at the same time, still allow them to not have to pay so much money back on these ridiculous payments. You've seen all these different horrible situations people have been in, and you're like, wow, I didn't know. Lady's like paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like $500 back. She was like 70. It's like, it's crazy because of the way the loan was structured. She didn't know that. I don't know. There's so many situations like that where I think we should let these people not have to make that payment anymore.
I agree with all of the problems you listed. I just think we disagree on the solution. And listen, I wish we lived in a country where we didn't have to worry about resentment, but that is everything today.
No, I certainly agree with that.
Like worrying about how people are going to take a certain policy and respond. And that's something you have to contemplate today. And, that's just a fact of it.
Do you saddle your kids with debt, or do you use your retirement savings to pay for their college right now? Is a situation that I'm in to some extent. Like, all right, well, I'm saving money for retirement. I don't want to pay for my kids. She can just get a loan if need be. I mean, hopefully there's other solutions, or it won't cost that much because she's not going to go to, some expensive private institution, and she'll go to a state school or something. But, those are the, I think, predicaments that a lot of people, I think most people would say, I shouldn't have to be, saddling my kid in debt and still then having to help them when I'm 65.
I don't think the system makes sense for most people.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, a lot of the people who are going to pay for this problem didn't go to college, aren't going to college, don't have kids going to college, not paying for college. I mean,
how are they paying for the problem?
Tax dollars. Your tax dollars.
Yeah, but your taxes aren't going up to pay for, this money's already been spent. The federal government already covered these loans. Like, it doesn't affect, like, Joe Schmo's taxes. I don't think. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I don't.
Yeah. I mean, it does. When our taxpayer dollars are used for certain things, when they could be used for other things, or we could, I don't know, keep more of our money. It affects you.
We can talk about that with everything, I suppose, too. By the way.
Yeah.
It's always a good argument to discuss between people on different parts of the spectrum where government spending should and is best spent, I guess, most effective.
I miss those conversations.
I know.
Because in today's politics and on cable news, we're not having a lot of those conversations because we're talking so much about culture wars. But how the government spends your money, like, that's a real good conversation to have.
Yeah. Yes. And I want to keep having it with you and with everybody else. So we'll have it here, folks. And that is all we've got. SE Cupp, as always, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. Love you. Yes.
All right, a big applause as we go out for S.E. Cupp. Wasn't that great? That was fun, right? Huh? Are you outraged? Some people were. I shared that clip where I called her a prick on video on Twitter. Some people really they get really upset at what she said, and it wasn't even the whole argument. Wasn't even there. Anyway, I love the conversation, and she's a good friend, and at S.E. Cupp on Twitter. All right, well, now it's time to get to another good friend who I think is brilliant and hilarious. It's Maura Quint. We love Maura. She usually joins us on Mondays. We call it Maura Mondays, but I've decided to abandon that attachment to that or any of these other kind of slogans, because especially when it comes to putting a guest on a certain day, I thought it'd be great to just have that guest booked and have expectations. But whenever I get to talk to her or whoever I'm talking about, Waj Wednesdays or Christian and Ophira on Fridays, I'm just going to try to make it work and not feel that pressure. But I'll try to keep actually having these guys on as often as I can, because Maura joins me almost every week, and people love these conversations. So now it's time to shut up and get to it. You should follow her on Twitter at Behind Your Back. Support the nonprofit where she is the campaign chief. It is the Americans for Tax Fairness, and read and support all her stuff. Here it is, Maura Quint, right now. There she is, Maura Quint, who I haven't spoken to on the show since you went both to Maine for a yoga retreat, and then you went to Norway, the country of Norway, with your family for some reason. And so, by the way, welcome back. We're happy to have you back. What does going to those two places with your summer trips say about you? What do you think it says about you?
It says, I really want to see a moose. I want to see a moose so badly. I will go anywhere there are moose, and I've never seen one.
And
it's very upsetting.
Why do you have this desire?
I think because they're terrifying. I think that's it. Moose are my sharks, you know?
Oh, really? I don't have fear of moose. I thought they were a friendly big deer.
They're not friendly. They're not friendly. They're not big deer. You cannot put out your hand. From what I understand, I don't know. Maybe someone's been fear-mongering moose to me. That's possible too. I haven't really looked into this all that much, but my understanding is there's like a whole collection of big animals that we think of as like kind of cute and stuff, but are actually incredibly aggressive and scary, like hippos. Like, hippos are very, right. You stay away from hippos. And moose, like they get very aggressive and protective, and they're not just little like cuddly, bumbling things that hang out with squirrels and like,
you see another one you see a lot. I'll throw in this category, and maybe you'll argue because it has horns and it's not exactly, but I think people look at buffalo like they do a dairy cow.
Yeah, I think so. Also, walrus, I've heard, are pretty like, you gotta watch out for a walrus.
Were you in Norway during the major scandal over was it the walrus?
I was there the next day. Yeah,
so there was a walrus.
Literally landed the next day.
If I had this right, a walrus was living in like the bay or the marina area where there are a lot of boats parked. And the walrus would climb up somehow on the back of a boat, and it would lie there. And it kind of became something that I guess most of the boat owners really liked, and he kind of became like the mascot for the marina. And then like their equivalent of Fish and Wildlife Agency or whatever, Norway's were like, listen, you can't. This walrus is gonna tusk somebody, and then they put it down, and there was a big outrage.
Freya, it was literally like as we were flying over there that this news was breaking that they'd put Freya down, and I was very curious about how that was like, what the perception of that. And it turns out my aunt and uncle who live in Norway, and that was the reason I was taking my kids. Got it. I have family there, so I can stay with them. They live 5 minutes from where Freya was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's like a beach and stuff and like swimming docks. And so it's like a very popular place for kids to be swimming. And I guess that was the motivation for putting her down, was that she's too dangerous to these children. But all like the Norwegians were mad too. They were very like, we don't understand why you did this, because I kept asking like, could they not have transported her? And they're like, exactly. I mean, she's massive. I don't know how you do that. We don't even know if she'd survive being transported, but like, at least there's a chance, right? We know she won't be survived being put down. So, seems the odds are better with trying to put her somewhere else. But
oh, wow. What a major divisive issue for that small town of Norway. I went there once for a week in the summer of 1997. I had a good friend there, and I had a relationship with a woman who I'd met while I was working in my college internship at Disney World. I only knew her like 3 weeks, but I really fell pretty hard, and we had this fun little affair. And then I went there.
She was Norwegian?
She's Norwegian. She worked at the...
Good for you. They're very, very hot people.
Hot people for sure, but she just...
Holy heck.
I think her English was like... It wasn't perfect, obviously, so she called me beautiful. She said I was beautiful, and that would just about did it for me. I was like, no woman had ever, even to that point, called me like anything like that. It made me feel so good. Anyway, I really liked it. Went to Norway, stayed with my buddy, this other guy who I knew, who I'd worked with in New York City and since moved back to his homeland. And I did visit her, and it was wonderful. But this is more about the fact that I went to a beach there, because you mentioned that beach, and it was women go topless. And I had seen that only one time before, and I've not been to an American beach like that, and still haven't. And I was 22 years old, and it was a topless beach in Norway, and it was all I could do to just remain composed and mature and not stare. It was super weird for me. And yet there it's normal, apparently, topless beaches.
I don't know, because I didn't go to any of those. We weren't in like any.
You didn't bring your sons to a topless beach?
I mean, I would have just taken them to. I think they just call them beaches there, is what you're trying to say. But like,
yes, yes.
But no, we were just, because where we were was right on the water. We didn't have to like travel to any beaches where there would be other people. Plus, it was getting kind of cool while we were there, which did not stop anyone. My kids were in the water. I was also in the water, but you know, I have swimsuits, so that's not.
Did the sun not set till 11 o'clock or something like that?
Yeah, and then was up at 5. Yeah, I mean, we were past the longest, the like midnight sun period of time, but it was still like super long days. Yeah.
And what is that? What do you have to say about that? Do you like that? Does it throw you off? Is it a great thing? Do they like it?
They like it. I mean, but then you have to think about the flip, right? That's because we're in the summer. Yeah, in the winter, then there's no sun, and that I think is really brutal. I know when I've like struggled, my aunt has always been the one to go to tell me exactly like what are the best like vitamin D UV lights that you can get in your house, kind of thing, because she's very familiar with that sort of stuff. I think that part sucks, but it's what I found is that it's very good for partying. Like people really enjoy just staying up incredibly late blasting music, and it feels kind of less annoying when you're hearing other people's music at like 11 o'clock at night when it's still kind of light out. You're just like, oh no, it's fine. It doesn't seem as like intrusive. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's. I was fascinated by that. Those long days. Also, they probably drink more.
You were fascinated by the topless women. Like, I don't even know that you saw anything else while you were there.
I wasn't sure if I could even look in that direction. I didn't know how to behave. I didn't know. It's just bizarre. Plus, everybody there is beautiful. I'm not just talking about the women. All of the people are very. I don't know. It almost sounds white supremacist saying it because it's such a white country, but and they're
right. Like
and
you
they're
just feel very like, oh no, Hitler. Oh, it's like terrible. You know, it's really rough. But like, no, they're whatever like the beauty standard that we have, taken in culturally as this is what beauty is, like tall, elongated bodies with like fair skin and light complected hair and everything. Yeah, that's what we've like internalized.
Yes, that's what I'm doing. But
yeah, no, I mean, like, we've, society has told us that. And then you walk around and you're just like, everyone looks like that here. That's weird.
Yeah.
But then I wondered, okay, but like, you're right. I actually had this moment because I was like on a train and they had, like ads on the train, like they do anywhere. And like, there's like the women in the ads, like, like modeling hiking boots or whatever the thing, And then I look around and I'm like, everyone in the train looks like those women. How do they decide who models? Like, do they just take turns?
Well,
is it just like, it's your turn today, Svetla, go ahead. Like,
modeling is like a required service. It's national service.
Yeah, that's right. It's like you can go into the military or you can just go pose for a couple of pictures holding a tennis racket. Like, it was so bizarre.
I see the Norwegian. When I think of the Norwegian men, I think of a very strong-jawed, powerful, strong, tall man. That's what I think of.
They're very tall. That was the other weird thing was that I'm like so used to, I met someone who I'd never met before. And I was trying to like say what I'd, how to look for me in this public place. And I was like, normally I can say like, I'm the tall girl. Like in this case, I was going to be like, I'm the tall girl wearing a navy rain jacket. And I looked around and I'm like, oh no, that's everyone. Okay. I'm the brunette. That's how you can tell me.
You're what, 5'10"?
I am, yes.
So people don't know that. They might not have known that. I wanted
They
to clear
may
that up
not
for
have.
people.
Yes, I am 5'10".
I've never actually seen you in person, but you've told me that. And it's hard to believe because we only talk in the top quarter of our bodies. But
well, it's also hard to believe because I have a small head. So it's very confusing to people.
But I'm not sure I would be able to characterize your head without seeing the rest of your body. I, by the way, had a large head and a small body as a young man in a school-age boy to the point that...
Bobbleheadish, yeah.
What's that?
Bobbleheadish.
Well, that actually hurts more than what they did call me.
Good.
What they did call me was, one guy who gave everybody mean nicknames, and more power to him, I came back strong, was big head, little body. He would call me that full kind of all those words, big head, little body. But
that's too many words for a nickname. He's terrible at nicknames.
It's not a great nickname, which is why I really took a pause when you said bobblehead, because that would have been, thank God he didn't go with that, because that's way more clever. It's short and it does the trick. It is horrible to imagine.
It's right there. Yeah.
Anyway.
Lollipop would have done it too. I mean, there were lots of options he had.
As always.
That guy sucked at nicknames. What is he doing now?
I have thoughts. So Norway was also where you shared a photo from, where it was a photo of your children, your sons, your boys, in the backseat of a car, and they were looking at their screens, and you also shot the photo so that you could see out the window there was a beautiful scene that they were driving past, and you made a comment, and you shared that on Twitter, and you made a comment, and I wish I had that in front of me. Should I try to paraphrase it, or do you want to say what you said there?
Oh, no, because I posted 4 pics and they were different, like, sceneries behind them. That was, I'm, starting working on my next art display, which is entitled "My Children Ignoring the Most Beautiful Things I've Ever Seen in My Entire Life." And, I just thought it was funny. It was like 4 different photos and they're always like looking at, playing their video games, and behind them is just like, waterfalls and glaciers and just gorgeous greens and blues and really incredible stuff. And people enjoyed it at first. There was a lot of like, parents just sort of laughing along and like, yes, and we get it. And I mean, I didn't post the additional context because I didn't feel like I owed anyone. It was just a joke about parenting, basically, because I think we've all been in that situation. The context of which was we were in the car for 22 hours over the course of 3 days. Like, the kid, we were just constantly in this car driving around, and also everything in Norway that we were driving past was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. So it's just like, you can't stare out the window the whole time. Like you couldn't, even if they were the most like in the moment present children who just had tremendous appreciation. No one could. Of course, mostly they were just playing video games, but that's fine. Like, they paused when needed. But it was, something that was supposed to be fun and cute, and was to a lot of people. And then, of course, the throngs came.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. So what were some of the criticisms or reactions?
Well, it started it started kind of small. It started who gave them the iPads or whatever, like that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, of course I did, idiot. Like, yeah, I know. what are you talking about? Then even you're on your phone. Yes, that's part of the joke. Yeah, I'm glad you got that part. That's
Is it
good.
true that
a little bit more nuanced?
Is it true that at one point when you were being a hypocrite and looking at your own screen was when a moose went by and you completely missed it?
Don't say that. Don't tease me with the moose that could have been.
Keep going. So what else?
Moose. Yeah, but then it started to get more like that started to snowball, and then it became a bit more like aggressive and violent edged. It never quite hit full violent, but like that kind of like terrible parents, and you're angry at your kids for stuff that you're telling them to do. Like, it was people bringing a lot of their own. It seemed like a lot of their own trauma to it. Like,
sure, yeah.
They came from situations where they have a lot of anger at their parents, and so they're like, or whatever, they've internalized some sort of really oppositional kind of stance, and they were bringing all of that anger to this post that was just like, parents goofing around, and people in the comments, like parents just having fun, and they were going after those people too, and just you're evil, you're like very, very disappointed and angry. And so eventually I took it down because I was traveling and I didn't have time to
well, that explains.
deal.
I've been scrolling this whole time. You've been talking and try to find it.
I was just like, no, I don't have the time to like permanently start just like sitting there blocking as people get more and more worked up and angry.
Was there any comment that was even like clever to the point that made you think about doing anything differently as a parent? Which, by the way, that context you provided is great. Nothing. Okay. Yeah.
Not even a little bit. No,
Right.
I was even like, I think the only thing that would give me pause was just like a handful of people saying, you know, I'm glad social media didn't exist when my parents, you know, when I was a kid, which would have given me pause, except that I had shown the post to my children and let them know I was posting it. So like I had their permission too. So it was like that could have maybe been like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't post things about them that they could find later. But like, because they were bought into it too, to a point where it became like even an in-joke with us, where I would go to take a picture of them and they'd like instantly look up, like, you're not going to get it off this time. Like, you know, it was just kind of became a silly little thing.
That's so interesting. It's interesting, especially because it is kind of a sociological experiment. It would be for anybody, but because you, Maura, Quint, have 125,000 followers, and they're a certain type of follower, I would argue. They're smart, they're funny, they like you mostly, and I think that probably the level of engagement is generally high. And so it's an interesting thing for you to tweet out about your boys who are what? How old are they? Like
9 and 11.
Yeah. Well, you know what is interesting, and always asking your kids for permission, do you mind if I post this? Because frankly, generally, you think through it yourself, like, what could this possibly be reflect negatively on my kids? What would it do? But still, you might not know something. And so, you know, a kid that age can still be like, I don't want you to post that because I don't like that I'm holding Legos, and Legos are blah, blah, blah. And the weird thing that maybe you know, because you're pretty smart and wise, but I didn't know this, is that when your kids get social media, first they become less good people, but then you become part of their social media, and you don't even know it. Like, I didn't know this for like a year, but apparently Julia, 14, about to be a freshman, has basically created a whole narrative on Snapchat of my different facial expressions as I walk in the room.
Oh my God, that's wonderful.
Like,
can I be friend her on
friends.
Snapchat? Is that allowed?
No, it's not allowed. I got really mad at her. I was like, stop doing that. That's my private. And then she was basically like, okay, I'll stop. Click. And like while I was reprimanding her, there's nothing I can do. It's gone. It's out. I'm this guy.
That's really, really funny.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. Yeah, I hadn't really thought that through about like, they're going to start. I've seen it with some other people I know who have older kids where I'm like, oh, you're talking about, like, I know your mom or your dad and that's who you're talking about. But like, so far it's only been in ways where I can see everyone's comfortable with it. Like, I've never seen anything where I'd be like, oh, somebody needs to know that that's being said about them.
Yeah.
But I definitely, like, my kids at this point too, they, you know, I'll take their pictures sometimes, and I don't actually post pictures of them almost ever on any social media. Like, not even, I don't use Facebook like that, and they're rarely on my Instagram, and I'm almost never on my Twitter. So it's like very, very rare that I ever post any pictures of them.
Weird that you're trying to get them into modeling so hard.
Well, you know, I think that if I take them to Norway, it'll be like, what are those kids? That's different. Let's get pictures of that. We've never seen that before. Did you see that kid? He's got brown hair. Do it. Come on.
He's unique. He can make some money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you were going to say the kind of the ethics of when or why. So why is that you don't generally post?
Oh, yeah, because I actually started off not posting them much, primarily out of like fear because people would target me, and I didn't want them to be that familiar with my kids' faces, basically, because it was a little bit of paranoia.
Sure.
But then, now it's much more like, right, like they are going to see these things or will have access to see them. And so, they should not be afraid of what they're going to find out about themselves online. That is like, that informs what I do now, which is why, again, like I showed them the photos and I showed them the post before I hit post and let them know that this was the joke I was making, and they were fine with it. But strangers weren't, so. Oh, well.
Interesting. Very interesting. And then you deleted the post because it just wasn't
Yeah, I mean, it was at like
That's too bad.
10,000 likes. Like, it was kind of snowballing. People were really into it. Parents were really getting on board with it. But with that, and for the first day, even like maybe it was, 6 hours, 12 hours or so, it was only met with like just people laughing, just people like finding it funny and parents commiserating or like sharing the same sort of thing. Very, very little. It was only once it started getting really big that it just started getting flooded with the like, oh, I see that you're not showing up to your therapy sessions regularly, and you would benefit a little more by talking through these things with someone else rather than going online.
Wow, that's really interesting. By the way, I think the other thing I do is when we are driving and they're glued to their phone. Generally, they're not allowed to have their phones when they're driving.
Oh, yeah, mine are never.
I don't mean on a long trip. You were on
Yeah.
a long trip on vacation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking when I'm driving them to school or we're going to, anywhere we go. That's my time with them, A, and B, I want them to just have that. I can police them. Frankly, that's the only time.
Right.
And so I
Right.
generally don't let them. But when they are when there is some nature, even in a long trip or a short trip, like one time there's like this beautiful like harvest moon or whatever it was. It's huge. And I'm pointing to it and Julia will not even look up. So then I have to like say something that isn't happening to trick her. And I was like, if you look close, you can see the actual satellite. If you look really close, and she's like, what? And she looks up. She's like, no, you can't. And now I'm out. Like those jokes don't work. So I'm out of it. Like I can't even trick them now to look out the window because they're on to me.
That's really funny. Maybe bribe them? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where you go from here. Oh, you know what you should do? You should start being like, I'm making a new face. Like, make them like look up and want to take your picture and then be like, haha, not me, the moon.
Oh, right. Yeah. Just give her more material for her Snap stream or whatever that is.
That's right.
Snapchat, which is also one more.
I didn't know people still use Snapchat. That's good to know.
Oh, it's the exclusive form of communication for teenagers.
I had I thought it was done. I thought people all abandoned that one like a couple of years ago.
Not in my community. Maybe.
I mean, I don't have teenagers, so it's probably been going strong the whole time. I just did not know.
One of the functions that is the worst function, and there are other apps that do this, but the other night there was a party. We weren't letting Julia go to this party the other night for several amazing reasons.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And she got really mad because you can see on Snapchat where everybody are, and they're all on this, they're all at one house, and she's not. So that type of FOMO, it's brutal. It's so brutal. Imagine if we had that. We did have it when you felt that. You knew that your friends, 4 of your buddies went to the lake and they didn't bring you. At least I did.
Oh, yeah.
Those bastards.
I'm still traumatized
Louis,
by
Alex,
the
Chris, Josh, Dave. I hope you're listening. I wanted to go on that trip.
Oh, hey. I mean, Megan and my high school friend Megan and I still have this joke of like, the one day they were trying to all hang out without me, and then I found out about it, and she was just like, "God damn it! How did you let her know? We told you we were not going to let her know that we were." I'm still mad. I'm still super mad.
Think about that now. I mean, like even on spring break, when it seems like all your friends are always doing something. They're all they can see all of their little images in Florida. And we're here. And, look at my friends are in Florida. I'm like, I don't like them. So good. Let Florida have them.
I hope they stay there. Yeah, exactly.
I like my daughter's friends. I hope they weren't listening. There's just one. So anyway, I wanted to talk with you about the issue of college loan forgiveness. You, of course, are someone who is very much in this world as an activist, as a writer, and your Twitter feed has been great on it. Where were you before this? I mean, had you been advocating for loan forgiveness for a long time?
No. I mean, it wasn't on my radar for too long. There is a great activist named Melissa Byrne who's really been leading on this in so many ways for years. And so really, I got to know her several years ago. And just by being in her orbit, I sort of got on board and learned more because she's she's just been such a tremendous example. But I didn't, because I'm a spoiled brat, I didn't have student loans.
Right. Didn't affect you directly, so it wasn't on the radar. Yeah.
Yeah, it just wasn't really there. And I mean, it wasn't a spoiled brat because, I come from this tremendous amount of money and I went to Harvard with all that, there wasn't that. But I am old, so college cost a lot less when we went. And I specifically went to an in-state school, so it would cost even less than that. And my parents were able to help me with some of it. And then I worked really hard for the rest of it. But I specifically at the time did not go to the schools that I wanted to go because I was afraid of taking out loans. So I guess I could be the sort of person who's like, I worked hard and I could have gone to, Georgetown or NYU or something, but I didn't because I was fiscally responsible with my, blah, 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 blah. I could be that asshole about it, but that's insane to me. That's the most ridiculous thing I could even imagine being. The student loan stuff didn't benefit me directly in that way, but I think it's incredibly important. I think it absolutely benefits society as a whole, and I think we need to do a lot more.
What do you say to the people who think that it's not fair?
Well, I mean, look, it's the same people who would be very happy to turn to you at any moment and say, well, life's not fair, right? Like that's those people invented that phrase. That's like how they've based their entire worldview. So it's always like a real kick to be like, oh, really? Oh, is that, coming back at you now? Oh, I see. But, it's nonsense. It's nonsense for so many reasons because, I mean, one, no one's taxes are going up. This isn't actually affecting anyone's taxes. It's getting sold a lot on the right. Like, you're going to have to pay for these kids.
They're saying it's going to cause inflation, which is a great talking point if it were true. College loan forgiveness is going to make milk cost more. Is a pretty sound argument if you believed it.
Yeah, no, if you can make up whatever the fuck you want on the spot about anything,
well,
which they're happy to do, right?
Economics and tax.
But then, at the same time, who cares? They can say it's going to affect inflation, or they can say it's going to actually create literal zombies who are going to come to your door and bite you, and then the zombies actually turn you into werewolves. Like, it doesn't matter. It's all the same nonsense. There's such a group of people that they're so far gone that whatever, they can be fearmongered to in any way that one wants. But no, it's not going to have any of those effects. It is a good thing as a society for people to not feel like they are just, they have absolutely no outs, that they are completely underwater, that they cannot in any way move forward with their lives. That's a good thing. Giving people access to opportunity, which is really what this is good. And additionally, because of this particular way that they've gone about it with the forgiveness of Pell Grants, you are going to see a decrease in the racial wealth gap, which is something that a lot of policy has tried to focus on, because we've had this consistently increasing racial wealth gap over, I don't want to say decades, at this point, centuries. So, anything that we can look to do to start to reverse and narrow that is good policy, and is good for all of us, is good for us as a society. It is bad when we have extreme wealth differentials. That is a bad thing. That's the sort of stuff that leads to the moment where people rush the palace with guillotines. Like that's what led to that, was truly outstanding extreme wealth inequality, and we're just rocketing towards it. So it's like the sort of crisis that it's good to start to do something about, to start to combat.
You're in the camp, and I think I am too. I'm not. I don't know if I fully am, because it's just because I get a little too Pollyannish and want to believe either my own ego that I can convince people with an argument or some other way, at least some people. But the camp being the Oliver Willis tweet that you shared, and I just saw my friend Tim Wise wrote something similar, which is, he writes, "Need y'all to understand that absolutely nothing is going to open the eyes of the right. There's no magical moment that will make them think they've gone too far. It's all okay, and the vast majority of them really like all of it," is what he says. And Tim Wise says something similar in his most recent post about, we should not try to be convincing these people. I guess I just get worried about these people, because who are they? There's gradations of people and on this scale. And I think that when we're trying to have a conversation about it, we use terminology like the MAGA right, or the white nationalists, or the Christian nationalists, or whoever they are. But sometimes I feel like there are some people whose eyes could be opened through a personal experience. For example, somebody might be, vote against women's reproductive rights, and then realize when his own daughter has an issue, which has actually happened in the last couple of weeks, I forget who it was, I was wrong. It's affecting me personally. Like, there are things that sometimes change. But where are you on this idea of trying to make an effort? Because the bottom line is, and last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up, is as you were just saying, do whatever you need to do to make people's lives better, to make society better. They're going to call you names and a socialist anyway, so just do it. And now I'm done talking.
Well, so I think there's a big difference between the collection, the collective group, and individuals. And I think there's a big difference between personal interaction and public policy. And so when I read the tweet that I shared,
that's a great point to separate it that way. Thank you. Yeah.
When I read that tweet that he posted in terms of there's not a thing that's going to move the right, to me, what that is talking about is there is not some sort of policy, hand that you can put out that's going to bring people out, or there's not something that they're going to do or see that's suddenly going to flip them. You're not going to point to January 6th. You're not going to point to prosecution as like good or bad. It's going to move them one way or the other. We need to be leading on a policy level from what is best for the collective whole and what is going to actually help people. We cannot be making these sort of like amends and trying to be like, well, it won't make them so mad if we only do it this way. And if we means test who gets baby formula, like whatever the hell stupid shit that they try and do. There's none of that. That should be thrown out the window, and policy should be led for what is going to help most people. That is, I think, absolutely true. Now, if you're talking about, yeah, but my uncle is a pretty nice guy who is just really all in on Trump or whatever. But you know what? He works with someone that is of a different race that he really likes, and whatever. If you, on a personal level, say, I think I can get to Uncle Tim. I think I got to keep talking to him, and I think that there's going to be like a way for me to break through, or even to like be available to him when he starts to maybe wise up or whatever it is, that, I think, we can't go ahead and just write off everyone we know personally. And I don't think that's very helpful to do either. I think that building community that allows for these people to re-enter individually in these personal ways, sure, that makes sense. We should absolutely be doing that, but not at the detriment of the collective whole. So we should not be doing that from a policy place. But absolutely, if you think that like, if I just invite Uncle Tim to Thanksgiving this one more time and I have this other conversation with him, it's going to break through, go for it, of course.
The problem is this kind of thinking has bled into all of our communities as well. And so when it comes to, like when the main fight I've been in with my daughter's school district, not with the district, I would argue I'm supporting the district against these maniacs who are demanding that they get to decide what gets taught, what books can and cannot be read. But by the way, what do you think of the idea that if a parent wants to criticize a book or say that they're, kids should have to opt out? Well, that's okay. But either way, if they really want to, have the book removed, should they not have to write a report on the book first? Do you like that idea?
Like a book report.
Yeah. Before they really weigh in, at least let us know you've read it.
I appreciate that. I think that's like...
Let us know you've read the book, please.
It's one of those like, oh, that's like really sweet, right? Like that's a sweet idea. Like, sure, that's going to work, except that ultimately that's not. Like we don't live in a society where I think that that's going to, as a collective sort of thing, really make a difference, because they just will go on. Like,
I wasn't making it as it wasn't a serious suggestion. I just think
but I like it. Like if I lived in a small little like collective where there were like just 20 of us.
Yes, that'd be more effective.
Then I could be like, no, write this report. But the
point is, like, if there is this strain of thinking and it even, I would say the word infects teachers. Here's the thing. I mean, there's still nuance there. Well, if it's the math teacher, he's not teaching economics, he's just teaching algebra. I don't care if he thinks the insurrection was somehow okay or something else, or that Biden didn't win the election. I mean, I'm not going to die on that hill. But if the history teacher or if the principal or if the superintendent is having these radical, fascist, white supremacist beliefs, well, that is where we do have to fight. How about that for a specific example, though?
I mean, I would want to, because I would not want that in my... But I can't tell you the beliefs of the administration of the school that my kids go to. So I sort of appreciate that. But I think in general, like public school is under so much attack. Like I think that at this point, the collective goal of at least the moneyed interests of the right is to completely destroy public education. Yeah. They want it shut down. They do not want public education to be accessible for many, many reasons. I mean, there are direct reasons they want it, and then there's a lot of indirect things that will benefit them, such as simply having a less educated populace is going to help the people who, absolutely prey.
But there's a lot of money. There's money in that budget. We pay money for our kids to go to school, taxes. They want it to be in their pockets through charter schools or any other privatized institution. There's a lot of money to make, and then they get these rubes out there to argue on their behalf. I want a charter school, and then their kid ends up not even getting into the charter school, or gets in and doesn't get as good of an education. It's all a racket, but there's a lot of money there. It's taxpayer money. They want it. That's why they hate anything public. Privatize it all. Put the money in my pocket. I want the contract.
Absolutely, yeah. They are very, very vicious on that. And fundamentally, the people behind it, the billionaires who are funding the candidates who are pushing this and building communities around this. I mean, so many of them are specifically for school privatization. And on the billionaire level, it's because there's money in it that they can be had. I mean, Jeffrey Yass is the wealthiest person in Pennsylvania, and that is his entire driving goal. He funds huge amounts to candidates, and his one thing is, you got to get on board with privatizing schools. He doesn't even care if it's a Democrat or Republican. Privatize schools and I'll give you money. And that's it. And so because we have these billionaires who are buying up elections, we are completely eradicating even the last remaining threads of what we think a democracy or a democratic republic could be, because they just have complete power and tremendous influence. Not to be too optimistic here.
Which is why we have to fight them on the beaches. And on the, who is it? That asshole Steven Crowder just made a YouTube video comparing himself to the men who stormed Normandy. Because
he's just like them.
He's calling for war all the time. And he's a YouTuber. And his role will be continuing to YouTube.
Here's what I believe he has in common with them. He probably eats most of his meals out of a can.
Yeah.
That's what I think the main thing he has in common with the soldiers who stormed the beaches.
That's
pretty much
probably
it, that's
where
it
starts and ends.
Yeah.
All right. I thank you for this very thoughtful conversation. As always, it's great to catch up. Oh, wait. How did the yoga retreat in Maine I think you told me at one point it was great, but you didn't go into detail. And I'm wondering, if you go to do a thing like that, do you carry anything out? I want to say that was a few weeks ago. Is there any lingering benefits or lessons, or was it just so worth it just to get away and go there and recharge?
Well, my whole point was to get into a healthier mindset. And of course, I got there the first day and ended up closing down a bar and then being too exhausted and drunk the next day to do the early morning yoga. So, I think I got a lot out of it, frankly. Mostly it was just gym.
Well done.
But otherwise, yeah.
Good for you.
It was great. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful.
The details to that give you a little more credit. You got there late, you were hungry, and the kitchen was still open, that the people that worked there, and so they made you a sandwich, and they ended up, as many people do when they meet you, liking you and hanging out, and next thing you know, you're pouring drinks. That's the truth, right? I don't mean to pull the curtain back too much, but you're not.
That is what happened, yeah.
Just go into a lonely bar after an 8-hour.
I would have, though.
I should have not said anything then. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, there you go. Who listened to it? You get an award if you listen to the old 2-hour show. I don't know what that award is, but if you listen to the whole thing, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. I love to hear from those of you who loved it all. And what were you doing during that time? How many times did you press pause or get interrupted or distracted? I'd love to know how you listen, when you listen. It's always helpful for me to understand that. A lot of people say, well, you're putting in a lot of work every day because, we have to do 2 guests every day. I don't know. I don't have to. I like interviewing 2 people. I like having these conversations. I like editing them and doing the work here in the shed. And I like that you like it and support it. And if you're not, I need your support. So sign up now, standupwithpete.com, or go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic and sign up for a paid subscription for as little as $5, please, because I can't do it without your subscription. And it's hard to keep these sustained as we head into a new month. Check your credit cards if they've expired, because I always lose a couple, I almost said prescriptions, subscriptions because people don't even realize that. So please stay subscribed if that's the case. Don't leave me. I love you guys, doing it for you, and would love to hear your ideas, suggestions, criticisms, jokes, contributions. Welcome to the stand-up community, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll taking us out today, as always.
Off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience. Well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.